Hi, fellow moms. This is TimeFree. It's a podcast I created for professional women who've become moms and really want to be present with their children and be the best moms they can be, but still keep their identity in the professional arena, achieving the goals and being financially independent. I think it's so important. Whether or not you have a partner or support. I think it's really important that we as women can really achieve financial independence in and of ourselves without having to rely on anyone else, even if we're in supportive relationships. So, the purpose behind Time Free and the reason why I decided to create this podcast was because I'm a lawyer. I'm a professional and I've been in this arena for 14, 15 years practicing. And I had a child and all I wanted in the world was a child. And I feel so privileged and so blessed to finally be able to experience this incredible magic of watching him grow and just being a mom is exactly what I wanted. But when I had my child, it was this almost rude awakening that I just didn't expect. I was working in corporate London at the time. I had a very secure job in a company I really loved, with colleagues I really, really loved and appreciated and felt inspired by. And all of a sudden, everything shifted. And it was during COVID. So I think there's a lot of COVID moms who've experienced something similar. But I just realized with that experience that nothing is secure, nothing is guaranteed. And it was quite a shock because at the moment where I needed potentially the most support in my career and in my life, I felt the least supported. And that was difficult, especially when you're getting over the emotions of being a new mom and having to be the person who this little being relies for everything. It can be really challenging. And what I found so strange is that I thought my experience was quite unique because there are so many women who are able to return to work and have a much easier and better transition. But what I was finding in going to networking groups and speaking with other moms who are also professionals is that it's a very common story. And there are so many things that affect how we feel, the things that we go through, the experiences that we experience. It's really common and we're not alone. So, the reason I started the podcast is to speak with these other women. I thought, surely, if I speak to enough people, we will have some indication of how people do it, right? How do these magical unicorn moms be excellent moms and still within their professional fields and are able to realize their dreams professionally and financially, but also be amazing moms. And that's the quest. That's our time free quest, is to take you along with me on this journey of finding out how do people do this. We have so much information and knowledge at our hands, but I think that we don't share these experiences with each other. And we probably should. And I would want to know. And looking back at the time is I wish that I'd been able to go back and have a conversation with some of these women to understand what their experiences were like. One, to not feel as alone, and two, to be able to create really great relationships, collaborations, look at how they've done things. Maybe I would have done things differently if I had known, and I would have saved a lot of years of really tough burnout and heartbreak and depression if I had access to some of this knowledge. I read a book called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon, and he basically describes that people want to see the background. They want to see how you've created this thing. And I'm not a podcaster by trade. I'm just a South African girl who moved to London and worked in the legal industry. So all of this is new and weird, and I'm probably not going to be a great podcaster for ages, but also Brené Brown talks about getting over that initial fear and the vulnerability that comes with the lack of control and also our fear of embarrassing ourselves and sucking in front of everybody, in front of our colleagues, our clients, our friends, our frenemies or whatever they're called. So yeah, come along on the journey, take some advice and some feedback and some of the stories with you. And my hope is that we can all kind of work together and collaborate and find roots out of this, that we can change the narrative around professional moms. Not to say that they should be these unicorns who like pop a baby out and are at work the next day, because that's just not physically how it happens. For a lot of moms, there are the lucky few who don't experience extreme complications, but we're creating a life, and that takes its toll on your body and your mental health and your mentality, the ways that you see the world, your perspective. So all of those things come into play. So on this episode, what I want to do is I want to interview myself. I'm just going to ask all the questions that I've asked my interviewees and let you know a little bit about myself. And it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to tell strangers on the internet all about my life. But my hope is that by doing that, I can, one, let people know that they're not alone in what they're going through, and two, maybe my story can resonate and help people to understand that there is another path, that there is something they can do about it, that they can have the information to be able to make the decisions that I couldn't make 5 years ago. So that's the hope. All right, getting kicked in. I've got my coffee. We are ready to go. And who were you and what did you do professionally before you had children? So I'm Michelle. Like I said, I'm from South Africa. I grew up in apartheid South Africa in a really small town as a, you know, not very white person. Let's put it that way. So I've encountered all sorts of hardships and racism and prejudice, but I've also been really privileged. My parents are from European descent, and back in the day in South Africa, you were known as an Uitlander. Means that you're not from here, I guess. And we experienced, quite a bit of the nonsense that went on in that time. But I think it gave us also an opportunity to straddle the line between being part of the system and not part of the system. And I think I was very privileged in the fact that my dad always focused on really giving us a great education and opportunities to evolve. And that's stood me in good stead. So I worked 3 jobs. We weren't wealthy at all. And I got myself into law school, and I was working like 3 jobs through law school. And then the last year I took a loan because it became impossible to study and work at the same time. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning. And the stress of working and studying, it led to me developing Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disease. And I was undiagnosed for many years, and then my mom died suddenly. So the compounded stress of the medical issues that Graves brings led to really severe burnout and psychosis. And luckily, I was diagnosed and I was able to uh, seek help. I've got Graves' eye disease, so you can see my eyes are a bit wonky. But I was really privileged to have been offered a role in a really great firm in South Africa. And I got to this point where I was working really, really long days and just really being put under immense pressure and stress as a trainee lawyer. And it was becoming difficult to kind of carry on. So I decided to move to the UK to find other opportunities. And I'm glad I did that. I went to walk the Camino through Portugal and Spain. And yeah, my family are Portuguese, so I got to spend some time with them in Portugal. It was lovely. And I think you kind of learn to trust yourself and to know yourself a little bit more. And it's a wonderful experience. And so I moved to the UK and I went through a sequence of London based corporate roles. I was living in central London at the time, walking through Hyde Park to work. It was quite idealistic, but I think there was always something missing. And that was like, I always wanted to be a mom. And finally, I found a partner who he's incredible. And we were lucky enough during COVID to fall pregnant. I had PCOS and Graves' disease, and they had radiation therapy for the Graves' disease without saving my eggs. So a lot of the doctors, the fertility doctors that I saw at the time said that it would be very difficult to fall pregnant and very difficult to sustain a pregnancy, given that I'm also overweight and old. So they make you feel like it's almost impossible. We were very, very lucky to have our little dude. I had a really difficult pregnancy, a really traumatic birth, but it's just a miracle. Having a child is incredible. It's incredible. But I went through a really, really hard time afterwards. And I think the woman I was previously was this very independent woman. I walked the Camino on my own. I would travel at least once a month on my own, anywhere around Europe and, around the world. I went to Asia. I went to different places in Europe, and I don't think I was ever afraid of doing things on my own. I was really independent and maybe not even realizing potentially the dangers. But I think as a South African, we're aware of our surroundings, and we don't do anything that's going to create issues, basically. And so, and because I was in corporate London in a professional career, I'm an intellectual property and technology lawyer as a specialism, and I loved it. It's incredible. It's very exciting, but it can get very difficult when there's constant pressure, right? And so, having a baby changed me. It changed my identity, and particularly because I had really severe depression after my pregnancy. And I didn't acknowledge to myself that I had depression because depressed people are supposed to lie in bed all day and not want to do anything and not want to go anywhere. And I was basically the opposite person. I had to do everything and I was super overwhelmed and everything had to be perfect and the house had to be cleaned and my work had to be done and I had to get everything absolutely perfect and I had to control everything. And I think in really high performing women, depression can look different. And we're not told that depression looks different. We're just told that we need to be a certain way and look a certain way. And Instagram shows us this kind of view of who you're supposed to be, and Facebook and all this sort of social media. And also around you, everyone else looks like they've put themselves together, right? Their house is clean, their babies are, you know, all clean and well looked after, their career isn't suffering. So I kept thinking, I just had this feeling that I'm just dropping all the balls. And I think, when I'm not doing things perfectly all the time and it becomes an issue at work, I think that's very difficult. I think it was about 5 years that I'd worked for the company I was with, and there were four mistakes I did within those 5 years. And because at the time I really needed flexibility coming out of COVID, I feel that my workplace at the time didn't really want to have to deal with me and deal with the flexibility I needed. And so they kept harping on about those four issues that could have been done better. And it really made me just question myself and question my worth and question everything that I've done in the last 15 years, and I think that was very damaging. And I really got to a point where I just had a complete breakdown. Um, and there were some other things that were happening, in my life as well. And that just made it really difficult for me. And I just remember I was on the floor in tears. I needed to stop. I needed to just not be here anymore. And I'd never been in that place before. I'd never been really depressed and overwhelmed in that way. But I think it was more about I just didn't want to experience this anymore. And it's so shocking to me now because everything I'd ever wanted was to have a wonderful, supportive home life and an incredible partner and a child. And I had all of that. And from the outside, it looked like I was living this incredible life in this beautiful home and this beautiful baby boy and this beautiful life. And I loved my partner so much. And it was really not that internally. And I felt sort of fragmented. I felt like I was still this independent woman who was super great at her job and really sort of intellectual in some ways, but also fun and liked to travel and liked to do all these kind of different things. I was doing a lot of aerial sports before I had my child. And then with COVID, everything stopped, right? And so I think there was all these fragmented parts of me. And another thing is that I picked up a lot of weight after my pregnancy. And I think that just contributed to this compounding effect about feeling so negative about myself and who I was at the time. And it's difficult. It's difficult to think that that's how you were feeling, but that's how I was feeling. And I really struggled. And I think the biggest challenge at the time was the fact that I felt that I was being pulled in so many directions and that I was failing in all of those things. And looking back, I wasn't really failing. I just felt overwhelmed and I was depressed. And the doctors had diagnosed me with depression, but I didn't want to believe it. So I think that was my issue. They wanted to put me on antidepressants and I tried them and they just didn't work. They just made me sleep the whole day. And so I kind of thought like, if I am depressed, there's nothing that can be done for me because the medication doesn't work. So I think that was kind of the point at which I left that and decided, well, I have to just carry on, right? That's how we think sometimes is I just have to move on and carry on. And it's difficult because when you're going through these cycles of burnout and you're going through these times of difficulty, it can be hard sometimes to just take a step back and say, "Ok, what do I actually need to get to the next stage?" And you're making all these decisions from this reactive space. And at the time, I was really struggling. And instead of communicating that, I resigned from my job and took all the safety, the financial safety away. And that was the wrong decision. I shouldn't have done that. But looking back, I felt like I really didn't have a choice. And the way that I was being treated, it really just made me feel like something had to give and that I wasn't being the professional I wanted to be. I wasn't being the mom I wanted to be. I wasn't being the me that I knew I could be. And that was difficult. So what changed is that I basically blew up everything and had a meltdown. Went through sort of cycles of burnout, cycles of depression, and I got stuck in a bit of a loop of just feeling super overwhelmed and not really knowing what to do about it. I tried the medication route, it hadn't worked. I tried the meditation and giving myself a moment every day, it just didn't work. Every time I dropping at nursery, I just feel so bad, and it was so expensive to take him to nursery as well, and I wasn't making any money. So it was quite difficult. It was a really rough situation, and in the UK at the time, when we were living there, we were struggling with the cost of living was increasing after COVID, and I accepted another role where they said it's super flexible, you can work from home, and then they needed me to go into the office all the time, and the office was like a 3-hour drive away, so it didn't work out, and I just decided there had to be a different way. There has to be another way of doing this. Like I did everything right. I worked hard and I was dedicated and I went through law school and I did the best that I could and I climbed the corporate ladder and I was always the responsible one. When all my friends were out partying and doing fun stuff, I was studying at home. I remember one time I got a text from a friend saying, "Oh, we're out here and it's super fun and everyone's having the best time on the beachfront." And I was driving home from a study session with a tax law book that was so heavy, it was setting off the seatbelt alerts on my car. So I had like this incessant beeping for 45 minutes while I drove home. And they were just having the time of their lives. And I just thought, I hope all of this is worth it in the end, right? Like I hope me putting in the dedication and doing the things that I thought that I had to do is going to stand me in good stead in the end. And I think the feeling at the time was like I've done everything I thought I had to do and I'm still feeling so insecure. We didn't have much savings, and especially after COVID and everything that happened, and we just needed to feel financially secure, and we didn't. And everything, the cost of living was rising, the cost of childcare was insane. We were paying £2,000 a month just for our son to be looked after for half days. And it was really extreme. And we just thought, how did we get here? You know, we'd worked so hard all our lives and we were in a position now where we just had no option. It wasn't that we hadn't worked hard. It wasn't that you'd been parting our lives away. And so for me, that was a big challenge. And then there was the identity shift as well and understanding who am I in this world? Am I still a professional? Am I still good at what I'm doing, even though I really want to be a mom? And I try to be the best mom I could, but it's also not easy, right? When you're not sleeping and you're not really looking after yourself. So that was very difficult. I think it was a very difficult time. And the decisions that I was making at the time were really difficult. So I think at the time I think if I look back, my advice to myself would be don't make life changing decisions in that state. Ask people around you, ask for help, and make decisions based on what would be the best longer term situation. I was really struggling at the time and I just wanted to not struggle. And I think making a decision from that perspective was not really going to help me in the longer term. And then how I reinvented myself. I think it was a good thing to have a severe breakdown actually, because I really had to assess myself and I really had to assess the things that brought me meaning and made me happy. And even though I really enjoy what I do, in the sense that I love a challenge, I love overcoming a challenge, I love finding a solution to the problem, I didn't like the corporate situation where there was always politics and there was always pressure and everyone wanted everything now. And sometimes as a woman, you're questioned. And it's just those kind of constant death by a thousand cuts, right? Like it's those constant little things that just make it really difficult. And so I had to break to build. And I think sometimes we do. We have to get to rock bottom to say, no, I need something else, especially if our life now is pretty comfortable. And though it's not perfect, it's comfortable. We kind of get lost in that comfort. And I just found no meaning in what I was doing. I had a memory of buying those little books that you record your baby's first steps and first words and all those things. And to date, I mean, he's almost 5. I haven't filled out that book because I just never found the time to do that. But I've done a lot of deals and contracts and business structuring and things for my clients that are great for them. Uh, but I found in the corporate space, you're not really helping people. You're just helping massive corporations avoid liability. And that to me just didn't have any meaning. And it would have been much more meaningful to me if I had filled out his book and I could remember what his first word was, because that to me is scary that I haven't done that and devastating, actually, because I don't think we can have any more kids. So that's difficult. And I think that the things that helped me through that period was just taking a decision that I'm going to be curious. I am privileged enough to be in a position where we had some savings, even though there weren't loads, we had some savings. We could live without having the income month to month. My partner makes money in terms of being able to survive, but not money in terms of being able to like get on the property ladder and actually build wealth for ourselves, but we could survive. And I think that was my aim at the time, is survival. And I just got really curious about what I liked and what I didn't like and what I wanted and what I didn't want to do, in a granular way. I did this exercise of asking the people closest to me, who do you think I am? Um, but it was really good having the insight. And it's from people who are able to give you a better view of how you appear in the world, right? Because the people we think we are aren't really the people we show up as in the world sometimes. And it's good to understand that. And I just was really curious about who I am. Who am I? I got into just trying to understand myself. And from that, I mean, I haven't got anything massively figured out, but I understood that I wanted to do something where I'm working with people and I'm helping people. That makes my heart happy. I feel like people are really cool. We're magic. And when we work together and when we collaborate, we can do incredible things. So I grew up in a very divisive society. Growing up in 1980s apartheid South Africa teaches you that the things that are being said, the authority is not necessarily the truth. The things you're being told is not necessarily the path you need to take. You have to think for yourself. And for me, that came out in me really trying to understand, who am I? What do I want? And for me, that's become something more along the lines of finding independence and being able to manage my own time. And that's where TimeFree comes from, is I wanted to find ways and I want to look at other moms and other professional women who have managed to carve out a space where they're able to create a life that they feel confident in and are able to be present with their kids and are able to create wealth and live comfortably and not be in the survival mode all the time, because that's difficult. So that's where this has come from. And the examples of moms who I've seen, wow, this really works, what they're doing, is that almost every mom that I've spoken to on the podcast so far, and moms that I speak to every day, is that they've carved out small, consistent wins. And one of the big things around that is a consistent physical movement. That's something I've not yet done. I know from speaking to so many women that creating a space where I'm moving my body physically every day or every second day, where it's in the diary, it's not going to move. I know that that's going to have massive effect. I haven't done it yet because I don't know. I guess I'm not confident with my body, and I'm not confident with being able to do those kinds of things now. I used to be quite fit, and I just feel like, there's this moment where I went back to aerial yoga and pole, and I couldn't do the things that I could do before, and it just really made me feel really terrible about myself and my body. So I think it's that fear of not being able to do what I used to be able to do, and like the disappointment in myself and how far I've fallen. But I see that in other moms, and I know that that would help. Also, there's tiny reflection spaces. So whether that's meditation or some sort of a mindfulness walk, moms who I've seen are really nailing this have carved out those moments for themselves. And that's like a non-negotiable. So it's not that it's in the calendar and you do it if you can and you don't if you don't. But it's kind of like their non-negotiable space that they have for themselves. And barring a massive emergency, that they do that for themselves. So I think those are maybe two things that I see that work really well. And then there are some parenting things that I think work really well that I haven't implemented yet. But there are a lot of parents who are able to put in place kind of ways of managing their own stress around parenting. So being able to give themselves a moment within the heat of the moment when your kid is tantruming or something's happening where you feel out of control, just being able to take a step back and then explain to your child how you're feeling and the fact that you are getting overwhelmed, and it sort of helps them being able to deal with that overwhelm. Whereas I just kind of tend to blow up and then feel really bad about it. And then practical tools and mindset shifts or strategies that I think that have made the biggest difference. I think there is something big in letting go and just accepting the way things are. So we took a decision to move to Spain, not because it was particularly about Spain. It was just that we had an opportunity to move. I, as a South African, needed sunshine in my life and maybe some beach life. And so we did. And it was very, very stressful. And I was very suicidal when we moved. But what's happened since is that I was able to find an antidepressant that actually worked for me. And so it hasn't taken away any of my problems, but it's given me a bit of a space between the problem and how I feel about the problem. So I have a bit of a space within which to make a decision rather than making the reactive decision, which has helped me immensely in being able to be a better professional, be a better mom, be a better partner, be a better me, in being able to take a decision more rationally and logically, as opposed to just reacting from that emotional space. That's been huge. And the other element is that we have finally been able to afford our first home. I'm 40, working all my life, since I was 14, basically. And I finally can afford to buy my own home, which I think is shocking. But it's given me such a sense of relief in that whatever happens, we'll be okay. We have a home, we have somewhere to be in the world. And that's been amazing. And being able to give our son a really good education, being able to meet really incredible people. I've been an immigrant everywhere I've been. My family are Portuguese and they immigrated to South Africa. My dad was a refugee to South Africa, and we weren't South African, but we were South African, right? So I've always been different everywhere I've been. When I moved to the UK, I was different. I wasn't from the UK. I was South African, but I wasn't really South African. I was Portuguese, but I wasn't really Portuguese. And now that we're in Spain, I don't know what I am. I'm just me. So it's not that I feel different, but I think that the thing is, if you can't speak Spanish very well, you're you're very different here. So that's been a challenge to overcome. And loads of people will say, "Well, just go back home." I'm like, I don't have a home, and this is my home now. And the law says I can be here. And so other people's opinions aren't going to make me rethink my life decisions. We're doing what we have to do for ourselves and for our family. And I think that that's kind of like that theme of letting go and accepting things. That's been huge. And that's only come from a lot of reading books and self help things and trying to practice letting go of small things. I used to be someone who, if I'd ordered something and it was the wrong size, I had to return it because I thought it was just wasting money. But actually, I give it to somebody who where it is the right size, or I just leave it in my cupboard to feel bad about it. Not really, but I'm not so pedantic about things anymore, and that gives me space to breathe, and I think that's important. And it's like in me giving myself that space and accepting the things that are, and that's a really tiny example, but in that space, I can feel a little bit better about the bigger things, and bigger things are going to happen. Life is like that; they just do, especially with kids. um, so, what would I say to a woman who feels stuck between their professional ambition, financial pressure, parenting, and wanting a more meaningful life? It's tough. It's tough. I don't know whether or not we need to break to rebuild. And I hope that there's ways that we can put in place small things that can have a compound effect and put us in a better position. What I would suggest to anyone who was where I was, where I felt completely lost and completely just unsafe and unsupported, is to say maybe removing is better than adding. So try and remove the things that you do. Try and be really critical about what the priorities are. So within your role as a mom, what are the key priorities? Making sure your child is safe and fed and happy, and making sure that you are safe and fed and happy. Um, and if the clothing has to be dirty, it has to be dirty. And if the dishes need to be not washed, they just need to be not washed. Making space for yourself to let go of things that aren't critically important, because I felt like I needed to control my situation and I needed to make everything perfect. And that's just not going to be the case. You're going to get overwhelmed. So I would suggest letting go of things. And in the case of work, I would suggest just trying to find some resilience and comfort in just not being perfect. I think that there is space to not be great, even with a role or a company or a business that where it is hard and they do judge you, because that's kind of the situation I was in at the time. And I felt that rather than disappointing them, I would just walk away, and that was the wrong decision. I should have just said, well, you're going to be disappointed for a little while because I'm not going to be, at the top of my game. So what? I'm still an excellent professional. I'm still giving great advice. I'm still doing everything that I have to do. I might take a little bit longer. I might not be in the office to do it. And instead of me being confident enough in myself to say those things, I just walked away because I was worried about what I would look like professionally, what my colleagues would think about me. And I really looked up to them and trusted what they were saying. And I think that that was the wrong thing to do at the time. I should have just allowed myself to be a bit more lenient on myself and given myself the little bit of space and grace, as they like to say, to use up some of that time and use up some of the goodwill that I'd generated over the X amount of years that I'd worked there. Meaning in life is different and it's different for everybody. So take some time out and think about what that means for you, and make sure that you're doing the things that your heart wants. So part of that is I set up a process for myself where I went through like lists of questions to understand myself better and lists of things that I want and what I don't want. And sometimes it's easier to know what you don't want, but it's impossible to know what you want. And I still don't know what I want, but I'm on this journey, right? And at least being on this quest to figure it out, it helps me feel like I'm a little bit on that way. It helps me feel not so lost and so trapped. I felt so trapped in my life in the decisions that I'd made. I was like, do I blow up 15 years of legal work and experience and become a yoga teacher or something? um, and it's difficult to know. It's difficult to know because you want to know what that life is going to look like, right? You want to know that in that life you can have a bit more space and time for yourself. It helped me to find a bit more of who I am and where I wanted to be. And then what does time freedom mean to me? This is it, right? A time freedom to me means that I can make decisions on what to do with my time. And I don't have to justify it to anybody. I don't have to ask anyone for permission. If I want to take my child to go and have an ice cream one day, I can, and I don't have to feel bad about it or guilty about it. I drop my son off at school and picking up almost every single day, and it's just a non-negotiable. It just doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about it. And I have clients that I really care about and that I really want to see them win, and I do excellent work for them because I really am invested in what they want and what they want to achieve. And it's usually sort of family run businesses and businesses that are doing cool stuff and doing things for the world. And I really think that that's important for me. That adds meaning to my life, and time freedom in that context means I can pick up the work that I want to do. I'm making much less money financially than I was in corporate London, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Like I'll figure it out. I'll figure the finances out. I It's more about, can this be sustainable? And at the time where I was, it couldn't be sustainable. I couldn't carry on in that vein. So that's my story. If you have an experience that you'd like to share with a group or insight that you'd like to share with us, I want to create a community of moms who come together and help each other be the most incredible professionals we can be, most amazing moms we can be, and the most sort of self actualized humans that we can be. So that's the intention. If you would like to take part, please go to timefreepod.com and get in touch. Let me know who you are. Let me know a bit about your story. And if you would like to join our community, there's a link on the timefreepod.com webpage where you can join our community, sign up for our newsletter, and just be part of a movement that is just trying to make things easier and better for moms who also want to be kick ass professionals. All right. Thank you. Bye.